Today, we are going to look at the most dumb ways people died. From a wannabe influencer who turned himself into a human torch with flaming cocktails in a remote cabin, to an urban explorer who suffocated in toxic air while chasing exclusive footage in an abandoned mall basement. It was March 15, 2019, at a remote mountain cabin outside Fresno, California. The morning air was crisp at 45 degrees Fahrenheit, with dense pine forest stretching for miles in every direction. Trent Ashford was 28 years old and worked part-time as a barista at a downtown coffee shop while pursuing his dream of becoming a lifestyle influencer. He'd been posting daily content about fitness routines, cooking experiments, and motivational speeches for 3 years, but his subscriber count had stagnated at 2,400 followers. Trent was obsessed with his appearance, spending hours perfecting his hair and outfit before filming each video. Co-workers described him as vain and entitled, constantly expecting special treatment because of his online presence. The cabin was Trent's sanctuary from the world that didn't appreciate his content. He had specifically chosen this isolated rental property, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor, to avoid interruptions and noise complaints during filming. The single-room structure featured a small kitchen, basic furniture, and most importantly for Trent, no cell phone service that might distract from his creative process. Recent months had been devastating for Trent's channel. His subscriber count had dropped to 1,800, and his videos rarely received more than 50 views each. Comment sections filled with criticism about his repetitive content and obvious desperation for attention. Trent knew he needed something spectacular to revive his dying online presence. He had been researching extreme content ideas for weeks, studying viral videos and analyzing what made them successful. Professional bartenders performing flaming cocktail demonstrations caught his attention, particularly videos showing elaborate fire displays that generated millions of views. Trent decided to attempt something no other content creator had tried: a tower of 6 flaming drinks using high-proof grain alcohol. Trent spent the entire previous day setting up his equipment throughout the small cabin kitchen. He positioned 3 cameras at different angles to capture every moment of what he believed would be his comeback video. Professional lighting equipment filled the cramped space, creating the perfect ambiance for his planned spectacle. He had purchased several bottles of 190 proof grain alcohol specifically for maximum visual impact. The remote location had spotty cell phone service, but Trent had brought a satellite internet device specifically for live streaming his comeback video. The expensive equipment represented his last investment in his failing channel, purchased with his final credit card. On the evening of March 15, Trent began his live stream with 43 viewers watching. He had arranged 6 glass containers in a pyramid formation on the wooden kitchen counter, each filled with grain alcohol that burned with an intense blue flame. Trent wore his favorite cotton shirt and had styled his hair with extra product to look perfect on camera. As he lit the first container, the flame rose well over a foot high, much larger than he had expected based on his earlier setup tests. Excited by the dramatic visual effect, Trent decided to add more alcohol to intensify the flames for his audience. The live stream chat filled with excited comments as viewers watched the dangerous display unfold in real time. When Trent attempted to light the second level of his pyramid, grain alcohol splashed onto his cotton shirt sleeve. The fabric ignited instantly, and Trent panicked, stumbling backward and knocking over the remaining containers. High-proof alcohol spread rapidly across the wooden counter and floor, creating a wall of flames between Trent and the cabin's only exit door. His hair caught fire as Trent tried to pat down his burning clothes. The incident continued to unfold on the live stream as his clothing and hair remained visibly on fire. The fire spread through the small kitchen within seconds, igniting curtains and wooden cabinets. Trent died from severe burns and smoke inhalation after the fire spread through the cabin. The cabin burned completely to the ground, leaving only charred remains and melted camera equipment. The property owner discovered the destruction 3 days later during a routine maintenance check. Local authorities reviewed the live stream footage and determined the death was accidental due to reckless behavior with flammable materials. It was August 22, 2017, in the basement of a defunct shopping mall in Akron, Ohio. The temperature outside had reached 89 degrees Fahrenheit, but the underground levels remained cool and damp from decades of neglect. Garrett Voss was 31 years old and worked the night shift at a warehouse loading dock while spending his weekends exploring abandoned buildings for his urban exploration blog. Garrett had been documenting forgotten places for 2 years, building a following of 3,200 subscribers who enjoyed his fearless approach to trespassing in restricted areas. Friends described him as a thrill seeker who constantly pushed boundaries, often bragging about evading security guards and ignoring posted warnings. The mall had been abandoned for over a decade, its interior stripped to bare concrete. Garrett learned previous urban explorers had documented only the main retail floors, not the basement levels. Garrett's channel was struggling against competition from other explorers who had already covered most accessible abandoned locations in Ohio. His view counts had been declining for months, and he desperately needed exclusive footage from a place no other content creator had documented. The mall's basement utility levels represented virgin territory that could give him a significant advantage over his competitors. He had spent weeks planning this exploration, studying, building blueprints, and identifying the safest entry points. Garrett recruited a camera operator to wait outside while he explored alone, wanting to maintain his reputation as a fearless solo explorer who didn't need backup or safety support. The basement entrance was located behind the former department store Anchor, accessible through a damaged service door that had been pried open by previous trespassers. As Garrett approached the opening, he noticed a strong chemical smell, but dismissed it as typical for old buildings that had been sealed for years. Garrett's determination to capture never-before-seen footage outweighed any safety concerns. He had built his entire online persona around being the explorer who went where others wouldn't dare, and backing down now would damage his credibility with his audience. On the afternoon of August 22nd, Garrett descended into the basement level through the damaged service entrance. His camera operator remained outside, monitoring Garrett's progress through a wireless video feed that transmitted his footage in real time. The underground corridors were pitch black, requiring Garrett to use powerful LED lights to illuminate his path. Garrett moved through several utility corridors, documenting rusted pipes, abandoned electrical equipment, and decades of accumulated debris. The chemical smell grew stronger as he ventured deeper underground, but Garrett continued filming, excited about the exclusive content he was capturing for his channel. The camera operator outside lost contact with Garrett's wireless video feed shortly before Garrett entered the sealed utility room, likely due to underground interference. After 30 minutes of exploration, Garrett discovered a sealed utility room that appeared completely untouched since the mall's closure. The heavy metal door was locked, but Garrett had brought tools specifically for bypassing such obstacles. He forced open the door and entered with his camera equipment, eager to document whatever lay inside. The room contained decades-old gas pipes that had slowly displaced breathable oxygen inside the sealed space. Without proper ventilation, oxygen levels inside the room had fallen to dangerously low levels over the years. Garrett had no way of detecting the hazard as he stepped into the contaminated environment. The oxygen-depleted air caused Garrett to lose consciousness within seconds of entering the room. His camera continued recording as he collapsed to the concrete floor, while the wireless monitoring feed failed due to the depth of the underground location. Garrett died from asphyxiation caused by oxygen-depleted air in the sealed utility room. After Garrett failed to return at their agreed check-in time, the camera operator contacted emergency services. Responders later entered the basement with ventilation equipment and recovered Garrett's body. Investigators also retrieved his camera, which contained uninterrupted footage of his final exploration. The video was retained as evidence and was never publicly released. The lower utility levels of the abandoned mall were subsequently secured due to hazardous air conditions. It was September 8, 2015, in a remote desert wash 30 miles southeast of Phoenix, Arizona. The temperature had reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-afternoon, with the narrow canyon walls radiating heat like an oven. Paige Holloway was 26 years old and managed a retail clothing store during the week while spending her evenings trying to build a fitness influencer brand. Paige had been posting workout videos and motivational content for 18 months, but her follower count remained frustratingly stuck despite her constant efforts to create engaging content. Paige's fitness content was virtually indistinguishable from thousands of other influencers posting similar workout routines and inspirational quotes. She desperately needed something that would set her apart from the competition and potentially attract the attention of major fitness brands who might offer sponsorship deals. Her apartment was filled with ring lights, camera equipment, and workout gear that she had purchased with credit cards, betting everything on her eventual success as an influencer. Paige chose the Desert Wash for its dramatic 40-foot sandstone walls and natural golden hour lighting. She planned a choreographed workout combining yoga and calisthenics, believing the setting would finally produce the standout video her struggling fitness channel needed. On the morning of September 8th, Paige noticed dark storm clouds gathering over distant mountains, but the lighting conditions in the canyon were too perfect to postpone filming. She had driven 3 hours to reach this remote location and couldn't afford to waste the trip. Her filming partner expressed concern about the weather, but Paige insisted they proceed with the planned shoot. She set up multiple cameras throughout the narrow wash to capture different angles of her routine. She positioned herself in the deepest part of the canyon, where the towering walls created the most dramatic backdrop for her performance. The setup took over an hour, with Paige adjusting each camera angle to ensure perfect framing. Desert washes are particularly dangerous during monsoon season because they channel flash floods from distant rainfall. The narrow walls that create such stunning visuals also create deadly traps when water levels rise rapidly. Warning signs posted at the canyon entrance specifically cautioned visitors about flash flood risks, but Paige had ignored them in her focus on creating content. As she began filming her workout sequence, her partner operated cameras from the canyon rim 40 feet above. The storm clouds were now clearly visible 20 miles away, but Paige insisted on completing her planned routine. She had spent too much time and money on this shoot to abandon it over distant weather. Paige performed an elaborate yoga sequence in the canyon bottom, moving through a planned sequence of poses while maintaining perfect form for the cameras. She was completely focused on her performance, determined to create the viral content that would transform her struggling channel into a success story. Suddenly, her filming partner heard a distant rumbling sound that grew rapidly louder. Around the canyon bend, a fast-moving surge of muddy water several feet high appeared around the canyon bend. The flash flood had originated from rainfall in the distant mountains, channeling through the narrow wash system with devastating force. Paige had no time to react as the torrent knocked her off balance and swept her downstream along with her camera equipment. The canyon walls were too steep and smooth for her to climb to safety, and the current was far too powerful for swimming. Her partner remained on the canyon rim as the flood surged through the wash. Her filming partner immediately called rescue services, but the remote location delayed response times significantly. Search teams recovered Paige's body 4 days later, along with fragments of her camera equipment scattered throughout the wash. Investigators later confirmed that no usable footage was recovered from the damaged cameras, and the wash was temporarily closed following the incident. The case was ruled accidental death due to flash flooding in a restricted area. Paige died from drowning and blunt force trauma after being carried several miles downstream by the flood. It was January 14th, 2018, on a remote frozen lake in northern Minnesota, 40 miles from the nearest town. The temperature had dropped to -18 degrees Fahrenheit, with a brutal wind chill that made the air feel like razor blades against exposed skin. Jet Blackwood was 33 years old and worked as an insurance adjuster during the day, while spending his free time creating extreme challenge content for his YouTube channel. Jet had built a following of 4,800 subscribers by performing increasingly dangerous cold weather stunts, including ice swimming, snow cave survival challenges, and hypothermia endurance tests. Friends described him as an adrenaline junkie who constantly needed to top his previous achievements, often ignoring basic safety protocols in pursuit of viral content. The frozen lake stretched for 2 miles in each direction, covered by 18 inches of solid ice that had formed during weeks of sub-zero temperatures. Jet had chosen this remote location specifically to avoid interference from park rangers or concerned bystanders who might try to stop his most ambitious challenge yet. Jet's previous ice swimming video had drawn 50,000 30,000 views, prompting viewers to push him toward more extreme challenges. Seeking to escalate, he planned an underwater swim beneath thick ice, entering and exiting through a single hole. He based the idea on videos of professional ice divers, but ignored their use of guide ropes, safety divers, and air backups. Confident in his cold tolerance, Jet recruited a 3-person camera crew to film the stunt, promising them a share of the revenue once the video went viral. The crew spent 2 hours cutting a 4-foot square hole in the 18-inch ice using a chainsaw and ice picks. The opening revealed black water that looked like a portal to another world. Steam rose from the surface as the 34-degree water met the frigid air, creating an ominous atmosphere that should have served as a warning. On the afternoon of January 14th, Jet entered the water wearing only swimming trunks and a diving mask. His camera crew positioned themselves around the entry hole to film his descent and planned return. Jet took several deep breaths and dove underwater, beginning his swim parallel to the ice surface. The underwater environment was completely disorienting, with uniform white ice above and dark water below, providing no reference points for navigation. Jet had planned to swim in a straight line for 90 seconds before returning to the opening, but the featureless environment made it impossible to maintain direction or judge distance accurately. After 2 minutes underwater, Jet became confused about his location relative to the entry hole. The uniform ice ceiling and dark water below made it impossible to determine which direction led back to safety. He attempted to surface, but found only solid ice above him. Without a guide rope or reference points, Jet had no way to navigate back to the opening. Panic set in as he realized he was lost beneath the frozen surface as his breath-hold time ran out. Jet swam frantically beneath the ice, searching for the entry hole as cold shock and oxygen deprivation impaired his coordination and judgment. The ice above him was too thick to break through, and the uniform white surface provided no visual reference points. Disoriented and running out of breath, he moved in widening arcs beneath the frozen lake, but was unable to locate the opening before disappearing from view. When Jet failed to resurface, the camera crew attempted to cut additional holes, but lacked the equipment and training required for ice rescue operations. Emergency services arrived 3 hours later, but were unable to locate him beneath the frozen surface. His body was recovered during the spring thaw 4 months later. Investigators reviewed the crew's footage and statements as part of the inquiry, but no usable underwater video was recovered. The incident was ruled an accidental death due to reckless behavior in hazardous conditions. Jet died from drowning and hypothermia beneath the ice. It was November 3rd, 2018, on a remote ranch property in West Texas, 60 miles from the nearest town. The temperature had reached 78 degrees Fahrenheit under clear skies, with flat, barren landscapes stretching endlessly in every direction. Axel Stone was 29 years old and worked as a delivery driver for a local courier service while spending his evenings building DIY science projects for his YouTube channel. Axel had been posting videos of homemade experiments for 2 years, gradually escalating from simple chemistry demonstrations to elaborate engineering projects that pushed the boundaries of safety and legality. His subscriber count had grown to 6,200 followers who enjoyed his fearless approach to dangerous builds and complete disregard for proper safety protocols. Axel's garage workshop was filled with power tools, chemical supplies, and half-finished projects that would have horrified any professional engineer. He had no formal training in chemistry or engineering, relying entirely on internet research and trial-and-error experimentation. Previous videos had featured homemade explosives, improvised rocket engines, and electrical devices that regularly caught fire during testing. Axel's most successful video showed a homemade rocket reaching roughly 200 feet, drawing 75,000 views and prompting viewers to push him toward larger, more extreme projects. Seeking to escalate, he planned a much bigger rocket and intended to ride it himself to capture first-person footage. He chose a potassium nitrate and sugar fuel mixture after online research, believing it offered high thrust using accessible materials. He secured permission to work on a remote West Texas ranch by promising the owner a share of future video revenue, counting on the isolation to avoid interference. Over 3 weeks, Axel built a 10-foot rocket from PVC pipe and salvaged salvaged metal parts, attaching a crude harness so he could strap himself to the device. With no formal training, guide systems, or safety equipment, he relied entirely on internet tutorials, convinced his preparation was sufficient, despite ignoring basic rocket engineering and safety principles. On the afternoon of November 3rd, Axel strapped himself to the side of his homemade rocket using climbing harnesses and rope. He had positioned multiple remote cameras around the launch site to capture the event from different angles, expecting the footage to become his most viral content ever and launch his career as a professional content creator. Axel's fuel mixture was far more unstable than he realized, mixed in improper ratios and packed into a poorly constructed motor casing. Unlike professionally manufactured rocket engines, his homemade design lacked pressure relief, reinforcement, and quality control, making failure during ignition highly likely. When Axel ignited the motor, the rocket catastrophically failed instead of producing controlled thrust. The casing ruptured under sudden pressure, sending burning fuel and metal fragments outward as the structure disintegrated at ground level. The remote cameras captured the sudden failure and fire before the footage cut off. With no witnesses and no scheduled check-in, the remote launch site went unnoticed until the ranch owner discovered the debris field 2 days later during a routine property check and contacted authorities. Investigators recovered the damaged cameras and reviewed the footage as part of the inquiry, determining the incident resulted from reckless construction and the use of an improvised rocket device in hazardous conditions. Axel died from blast trauma, fragmentation injuries, and severe burns at the launch site. It was June 22, 2014, at a regional amusement park outside Atlanta. Heat pressed down on the asphalt, stretching wait times and tempers. Phones stayed raised for reaction clips. The coaster cycled on schedule all afternoon. One teenage decision turned a routine dispatch into a silent shutdown and a recovery scene. Eli Carter was 16, a high school junior who split his time between classes and football conditioning. He was lean, competitive, and openly resentful of being corrected. He ran a small stunt Instagram for friends, minor dares edited to look fearless. He wasn't chasing fame. He wanted evidence he could outdo everyone watching. 2 weeks earlier, coaches benched him for ignoring tackling form instruction. Eli took it as disrespect rather than a correction. Friends later said he became louder after that, more performative. When phones came out, he pushed harder, framing defiance as confidence and treating every recorded moment as something he needed to win. That morning, Eli came with 3 friends and a friend's younger brother as a summer outing before school restarted. They traded phones in line and planned who would film whom. Eli kept repeating one idea: stand on the first drop to feel weightless and to catch it clearly on video. They chose a coaster using lap bars designed to lock a seated rider at the thighs and hips, relying on body weight staying low, especially at the crest when the train tips into a drop. The recorded safety message played. Several riders later interviewed said the group laughed through it. After the bar came down, Eli pressed the bar twice and nodded. On the lift hill, he slides his hips forward a few inches, creating visible slack at his thighs. To other riders, it looked like restless movement. On camera, it's clear his pelvis shifts closer to the seat edge. At the top, just before the chain disengaged, Eli planted his palms on the lap bar and pushed up like a dip. As the train tipped, the train accelerated downward beneath him. He didn't leap. The downward acceleration pulled him out. His hips cleared the bar first, then his torso rose above the restraint line. In the next instant, his legs follow into open space. Platform-mounted security footage later corroborated the timing of the fall. Eli struck the edge of a maintenance catwalk and then the support area below, with a dull impact distinct from the coaster's roar. The phone video shows him rise and vanish mid-frame, then the camera jerks down and the audio becomes layered, screaming. Riders in the same train felt it continue into the next element. Then the brakes hit and the cars stopped farther down the course. Theme park emergency services were immediately notified. Eli was found lying below the track, motionless, blood pooling into the gravel, one arm trapped beneath his body at an extreme angle. He was not breathing. Medics assessed for a pulse, briefly assessed airway and circulation, but the extent of head and neck injury was immediately apparent. Resuscitation efforts were discontinued and death was pronounced shortly. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death catastrophic blunt force trauma. The primary fatal injury was a high cervical spine fracture, meaning the neck broke high enough to instantly disrupt breathing and heart control, with additional head injury and internal bleeding. Toxicology was negative. The report stated the restraint functioned as designed for a seated rider and that standing created a foreseeable ejection risk. Investigators collected the on-ride phone recording, bystander footage, and platform surveillance before closing the ride for inspection. In the weeks that followed, Eli's school quietly banned stunt challenge content tied to team activities after students attempted to imitate the behavior in controlled settings. It was August 18, 2016, at a large regional water park outside Jaipur, India. Afternoon heat pushed families toward the wave pool, the loudest and most crowded attraction in the park. Waves rolled on a timed cycle. Lifeguards stood elevated, scanning the water. From the deck, it looked controlled and familiar. Rohan Mehta was 24 and worked as a junior sales executive for an electronics distributor. He spent most of his week driving between shops, competing with older colleagues for commissions. Friends described him as eager to stand out, especially in groups. He liked dares that made people look twice, not because he was reckless, but because attention felt earned. Rohan was a strong swimmer by casual standards. He'd grown up around pools and believed wave pools were easier than open water because they were supervised. He had no formal training and no respect for posted depth markers. To him, the waves were predictable, something you could play against if you timed them right. That afternoon, the wave pool was near capacity. Shallow and deep zones were separated by floating ropes and warning signs. Rohan crossed into the deep end with friends, then went farther, past the rope, toward the wave generators. Lifeguards signaled for him to move back. He waved them off and stayed where the water felt stronger. When the wave cycle began, Rohan positioned himself facing the oncoming swell. Instead of floating on his back like others nearby, he dove forward, pushing under the wave as it crested. He resurfaced, laughing. Friends at the edge recorded, framing him against the generator wall. He did it again, timing the next wave by watching the water darken and rise. Between cycles, the water near the wall pulled outward. The current tugged at legs and torsos, subtle but constant. Rohan stayed close, drifting a little farther each time. Swimmers nearby adjusted their position or grabbed the rope. He didn't. When the horn sounded, signaling the start of another programmed wave cycle, he took a breath and dove early. The wave hit harder than the previous ones. It forced him down and forward, compressing him toward the sloped concrete floor. His hands didn't reach out in time. The side of his head struck the incline near the sloped concrete base of the wave generator wall. The impact snapped his chin toward his chest and knocked him unconscious instantly. As the wave passed overhead, Rohan remained submerged and motionless. The head impact had stripped away muscle control and protective reflexes, and water entered his airway as turbulence carried him along the sloped floor. Before nearby swimmers recognized the shift from play to distress, the next wave cycle began. Nearby swimmers felt contact, an elbow, a shoulder, but assumed it was part of the crowding. Someone surfaced and shouted his name, then ducked again. The current carried Rohan closer to the wall, face down, his body rotating slowly with the backwash. From the deck, a lifeguard noticed the lack of movement during the trough between waves. A whistle sounded. Another guard cut the wave cycle. The pool's surface flattened unevenly, leaving Rohan visible near the generator area. Several guests continued filming, thinking it was a drill or routine assist. A lifeguard entered the water and reached him within seconds, turning him face up and signaling for help. Rohan was limp and cyanotic, his mouth slack, eyes unfocused. He was pulled to the edge as staff cleared swimmers away and brought a backboard. Rescue breathing and CPR began at the pool edge until EMS arrived within minutes and took over advanced life support. Rohan was transported to a nearby hospital where he never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The post-mortem determined the cause of death was drowning, secondary to blunt force head trauma. The head impact caused immediate loss of consciousness, eliminating protective airway reflexes. Water was found in the lungs, along with facial bruising and a minor cervical spine injury consistent with striking the pool floor. Investigators found no mechanical faults, the wave system functioned normally, and Rohan had entered a restricted zone and repeatedly dove into incoming waves. It was August 3, 2016, at a large coastal amusement park in Southern California. The park was crowded, orderly, and calm until a brief, careless decision unfolded in plain view. Mara Delaney was 29 and worked overnight in a customer-facing supervisory role, a job that demanded calm authority under constant exhaustion. She spent nights managing complaints and conflicts, sleeping in fragments during the day. On her days off, she planned carefully, not to relax but to document that the time counted. She came to the park with her younger sister and a co-worker, expecting something easy. They boarded a slow-moving scenic track ride, a family attraction with open bench seating and a standard lap seatbelt. The vehicles glided close to the ground, following gentle turns through themed structures. The belt was not a harness. It was meant only to keep seated riders from shifting during curves. Mara wanted a candid photo that looked unplanned. As the car idled at dispatch, she adjusted her dress and complained that the seatbelt sat awkwardly. She said she would unclip it briefly to turn around. Before the discussion ended, the vehicle rolled forward. As the ride moved smoothly through its opening section, Mara raised her phone, twisted at the waist to frame her sister, and released the belt. It fell slack, and her hips shifted on the smooth bench surface. As the vehicle entered a shallow banked curve, the motion changed. The speed increased slightly, enough to press riders sideways. Without the belt holding her in place, Mara slid across the bench instead of staying centered. Her phone shook as she tried to keep it raised. Her right shoulder struck the side panel with a sharp jolt. A rider behind her later said it looked like she tried to keep filming instead of grabbing the seat. She reached left, fingertips scraping along the edge of the bench without finding a grip. The surface was slick from mist and previous riders. Her lower body continued to slide. Her hips crossed the seat line, followed by her torso. In platform footage reviewed later, her lower body shifts upward as her weight tips past the edge. Her head struck a rigid boundary near the track channel. The impact was flat and abrupt, cutting through the ride noise. Several witnesses described it as a single hard sound. The phone flew from her hand and skidded along the ride floor. Mara's body collapsed sideways and did not move again. Riders in the vehicle behind saw her collapse sideways and began shouting. Several guests along the walkway pointed as the ride slowed and stopped within seconds. Operators hit emergency controls and called for medical response. Park security arrived quickly, followed by paramedics who assessed the vehicle where it sat on the track. Mara showed no signs of recovery. Paramedics assessed her where the vehicle stopped and pronounced her dead at the scene. Video recorded by nearby guests did not capture the impact itself, but showed her turning, releasing the belt, and slumping as the car entered the curve. Her final position in the seat and the recovered phone corroborated the sequence of events. The coroner ruled the cause of death to be severe blunt head trauma. The fatal injury was a fracture at the base of the skull caused by impact with a fixed edge, resulting in immediate loss of consciousness. There was extensive brain swelling and bleeding, injuries consistent with a sudden forceful strike rather than a fall from height. The investigation found the ride operated as designed. The seatbelt would have limited sideways movement if worn. Unbuckling removed the only restraint keeping her centered, and twisting during motion increased the sliding risk. No mechanical defects were identified. Her sister deleted most of the photos from that day and kept one unposted image from the parking lot, unfiltered and never shared. It was May 19, 2015, at a large regional amusement park in Sandusky, Ohio. The day was clear and crowded but controlled. Trains ran normally, no systems failed, no alarms sounded. What followed came down to timing, confidence, and a single decision made between dispatch intervals. Derek Morrow was 38, a union electrician from Toledo who worked around live panels, moving booms, and rotating equipment. He knew how machines behaved and believed that understanding motion mattered more than posted rules. Co-workers described him as capable but impatient, quick to bypass procedures he thought slowed competent people down. He wore a brand new baseball cap he'd bought that morning, a limited run he'd searched for and paid extra to get. He liked how it fit and how clean it looked. Losing it felt careless and irritating, the kind of mistake he believed shouldn't happen if you were paying attention. That afternoon, Derek stood near a gondola arm swing ride, the kind that rotates large, open gondolas on a sweeping mechanical arm. The arms swung out over a fenced exclusion zone, accelerating and decelerating in wide arcs. As a gondola passed, a gust from its movement knocked Derek's cap loose. It tumbled over the low barrier and landed on the gravel beneath the swing path. untouched. Witnesses later said Derek waited until the gondola arm swung past and the space beneath it cleared. From the queue line, several people saw him point toward the cap lying on the ground. Warning signs were visible along the fence. He stepped over it anyway. Phones were raised as he jogged into the marked exclusion zone. The ride continued cycling, the arm reversing direction as normal. As Derek bent forward and reached down, the gondola arm began its return swing. From the ground, it looked slow, but the video later showed the arm accelerating rapidly through its arc. Several witnesses said the first warning was the sound, a rising mechanical rush, seconds before impact. The gondola struck Derek high across the chest and shoulder line. The force lifted him backward and drove him into the steel support column at the base of the ride. His body folded against it, then collapsed onto the concrete pad beneath the arm. The gondola continued its swing for a brief moment before sensors registered resistance and triggered an automatic shutdown. Inside the gondola, riders felt a sharp jolt and looked down as screaming broke out below. Operators hit the emergency stop immediately and radioed for medical response as the ride locked in place. Park security reached the exclusion zone within minutes and cleared the guests back. Paramedics arrived shortly after. Derek showed no purposeful movement, no breathing, and no detectable pulse. Resuscitation was not attempted due to obvious fatal injuries. The coroner ruled the cause of death to be massive blunt force trauma. The initial strike crushed his chest, fracturing ribs inward and tearing major blood vessels near the heart. Secondary impact with the support column caused additional pelvic and head fractures. Loss of consciousness would have been immediate. Investigators concluded the ride operated normally. The exclusion zone was clearly marked and designed to account for the arm's full movement envelope. Entering it to retrieve personal property placed Derek directly in the path of the ride. The park reopened the following day. No citations were issued. Derek's union later held a closed safety briefing using diagrams of swing arm timing and clearance zones. His cap was returned to his family in an evidence bag, still intact. It was September 2, 2018, at Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. The afternoon was warm, lines stretched long, and brief ride stoppages were common as systems reset. Guests were used to it. From the ground, the paused ride looked ordinary, already blending into the background noise of impatience and phones. Caleb Rios was 26, a junior HVAC apprentice working commercial installations across southern Ohio. His job involved ladders, moving equipment, and mechanical systems that required waiting for lockouts before touching anything. He understood procedures and consequences. Co-workers described him as competent, sometimes impatient, but confident in his own judgment. Outside of work, Caleb wasn't reckless, but he disliked being told to wait. Friends said he often assumed inactivity meant safety. If something wasn't moving, he treated it as off. He believed caution mattered less once equipment stopped, a habit that carried into places where machines resumed motion without warning. The ride was a suspended attraction, with riders seated below the track, legs hanging freely. It used over-the-shoulder restraints in a computerized safety system that paused operation when sensors detected misalignment. The system was designed with one assumption: riders stayed seated until operators intervened. Evacuation procedures depended on that compliance. Mid-cycle, the suspended ride stopped near a support tower roughly 30 feet above ground. A routine sensor misalignment triggered an automatic pause. Operators announced a brief delay and instructed riders to remain seated while the system reset. The announcement was standard. Riders around Caleb groaned, checked phones, and waited. Caleb did not wait. Instead of treating the stop as temporary, he began treating the ride as inactive. He leaned forward and tested the restraint despite repeated instructions. Riders later said he joked about getting down himself. An operator could be heard over the speaker telling everyone to stay seated. Using body weight and repeated rocking, Caleb forced enough slack in the restraint to slip free. The harness was never designed to be opened mid-cycle, but it was also not designed to resist intentional misuse. He stood up inside the ride envelope and stepped onto a narrow maintenance ledge clearly marked for staff use only. From the ground, several guests saw him climb out and assumed an evacuation had begun. Phones were raised. Shouts came from nearby riders telling him to sit back down. Caleb ignored them and reached for a fixed ladder bolted to the tower, equipment intended solely for trained technicians during full shutdown procedures. At that moment, the ride completed its reset. System indicators are activated at the control panel. Operators saw movement on their monitors and moved to emergency controls, but the system had already resumed its programmed motion. The ride arm began rotating back into position as part of the reset sequence, moving smoothly at first, then accelerating along its programmed path. Caleb was still on the ladder, one foot on a rung, his body turned sideways as he tried to climb down. His upper torso extended past the ladder rails and into the space the arm was designed to sweep through during motion. The gap between the arm and the support tower closed almost instantly. There was no pause, no visible hesitation. The arm struck him across the chest and hips, driving him backward into the fixed steel column. His body was compressed between the two structures with enough force to buckle metal panels and deform his posture unnaturally. His arms dropped from the ladder as his torso was crushed inward. Witness videos showed the arm re-entering frame, followed by a sudden stop. Riders below saw Caleb pinned against the tower, unmoving. Sensors triggered an automatic shutdown, locking the ride in place. Filming gave way to shouting as the crowd realized this was not an evacuation, and staff rushed to the tower base. Operators triggered the emergency stop again. The ride locked in place with Caleb trapped against the structure. Park security initiated a 911 call within seconds. EMS reached the base of the tower in under 7 minutes, but Caleb showed no purposeful movement or breathing. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner reported traumatic crushing injuries. Compression to the chest and abdomen caused organ rupture and tearing of major blood vessels. Multiple rib and pelvic fractures were consistent with being pinned between a moving ride component and a fixed structure. Loss of consciousness would have occurred almost immediately due to the severity of the injuries. Investigators determined the ride operated exactly as designed. The reset sequence was routine and automatic. By leaving his seat, Caleb placed himself inside an active movement zone never intended for riders. In the weeks that followed, the park installed additional warning placards at loading platforms, reinforced fencing near maintenance access points, and updated ride announcements to emphasize remaining seated during stoppages. It was August 17, 2014, on a private game estate in Limpopo Province, South Africa. The land was large, fenced, and privately owned. It was not run as a conservation project. It existed mainly as a display of wealth and control. Marcus LaRue was 46 years old. He made his money as a mining logistics consultant, arranging the transport of heavy machinery across southern Africa. The work paid well and kept him out of the public eye. Privately, he wanted something visible to display his success. The estate was meant to be that symbol. Against repeated advice, LaRue kept a hand-raised adult male lion on the property. The lion was named Tariq. LaRue believed raising the animal from a cub made it safe. Staff disagreed. Several handlers quit over time, later citing safety concerns. LaRue dismissed them as overly cautious and unsuited to the kind of display he wanted. He believed distance looked weak and undermined the image he wanted. As months passed, his behavior became riskier. He entered the enclosure alone. He stopped carrying a radio. He ignored feeding schedules, saying unpredictability kept the animal under control. Secondary fencing was removed so the photos would look cleaner, despite warnings that it served no operational purpose other than safety. Security cameras showed changes in the lion's behavior in the weeks before the incident. Long staring, slow approaches, hesitation that ended closer each time. On the morning of August 17th, LaRue entered the enclosure carrying raw meat in his hands instead of using the feeding chute that had been installed specifically to eliminate the need for direct contact. Security footage showed the lion reacting immediately, but not with panic or noise. Adult male lions do not rush into unfamiliar situations. They assess. Tariq lowered his body close to the ground, reduced his profile, and began a slow, deliberate approach. His ears were forward, his tail low and still, signs of focused attention, not agitation. LaRue mistook the absence of noise for familiarity. He turned his back to reposition the meat, briefly exposing his shoulders and neck. In that instant, the distance closed. The lion launched forward in a short burst, covering several feet almost silently. The first impact knocked LaRue face first into the ground, breaking his collarbone from the force of the strike. Before he could react or roll away, the lion clamped onto the back of his neck. The bite was precise. The pressure crushed the cervical spine and tore a major artery. A nearby worker later reported hearing a single scream that cut off immediately. Drag marks showed the lion pulled the body roughly 20 feet, a normal feeding response. The animal fed briefly before staff arrived and fired warning shots, forcing it away from the body. Blood loss was severe, and LaRue showed no signs of movement when responders reached him. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived at the scene but were unable to provide treatment. LaRue was pronounced dead at the enclosure. An autopsy later confirmed the cause of death as a crushed cervical spine and arterial rupture. The injuries were consistent with a single neck bite. Trauma to the arms indicated a brief reflexive attempt to protect himself with no evidence of a prolonged struggle. Investigators found no equipment failure or gate malfunction. All safety systems were intact and functional. They concluded that none of the actions taken that morning were necessary to feed or manage the animal safely. The feeding chute had been installed after 2 earlier safety incidents involving close contact during hand feeding. Investigators determined its use was deliberately abandoned despite written warnings from staff. The lion was euthanized later that day. Authorities cited unsafe private ownership and repeated violations. The estate was shut down, and the land was later sold at a loss to a wildlife trust. It was August 14, 2019, just after sunrise at a regional airport in northwestern Wyoming. The sky was clear, the winds were calm, and the mountains were visible across the valley. It was a perfect morning for flying. One small aircraft sat alone at the edge of the general aviation ramp. The plane did not look like a private jet. It was a lightweight single-engine aircraft assembled from an ultralight kit. Its frame was thin, its wings narrow, and its cockpit exposed compared to certified planes on the field. The aircraft belonged to Mark Ellison, 56 years old, a billionaire tech investor who had made his fortune decades earlier. Ellison owned multiple jets and flew commercially whenever he wanted, but he disliked standard aircraft. He believed they were overbuilt, overregulated, and slow to respond. Ellison had bought the kit 2 years earlier and assembled it himself in a private hangar. The manufacturer provided clear limits, strict weight tolerances, fixed control settings, and mandatory inspections by certified mechanics before flight. Ellison followed none of that fully. He enjoyed doing his own maintenance and believed his engineering background made outside oversight unnecessary. Ellison complained that the aircraft felt sluggish during turns. He told friends he wanted it to feel alive, closer to a glider than a plane. Without consulting the manufacturer, he adjusted the flight control linkage that connected the control stick to the wing's ailerons. He loosened a critical tension bolt to reduce resistance, believing it would make the plane more responsive. Maintenance notes found later showed the component was never meant to be adjusted. It was designed to remain rigid to prevent flutter under load. At 7:22 a.m., Ellison taxied onto the runway alone. There was no flight plan filed beyond a short local loop. Ground cameras recorded the aircraft accelerating normally. The takeoff roll was short. The plane lifted cleanly and began climbing. Within seconds of leaving the ground, witnesses noticed the aircraft wobble. Its left wing dipped, then corrected sharply. The movement was not smooth. It looked uneven, as if the plane was fighting itself. At approximately 300 feet above ground, the aircraft entered a shallow turn. That was when the loosened control linkage failed. Under aerodynamic load, the unsecured component allowed uncontrolled movement in the aileron system. The left wing experienced rapid oscillation, known as control flutter. The vibration intensified almost instantly. The wing twisted beyond its design limits. The structure did not bend gradually. It failed. The left wing collapsed inward at the root, tearing free from the frame. The aircraft rolled violently. With one wing gone, there was no lift and no chance of recovery. The plane inverted and fell nose first into open ground just beyond the airport boundary. The impact was catastrophic. Investigators later confirmed Ellison died instantly. The official cause of death was massive blunt force trauma sustained during the crash. The aircraft disintegrated on contact with the ground. There was no fire. The fuel load was small. The entire flight lasted less than 1 minute. The wreckage was scattered across a narrow area, consistent with a structural failure rather than a loss of control at speed. Examination showed no engine malfunction. The control surfaces on the remaining wing were intact, The failed linkage bolt was found loose in the debris field, showing clear signs of manual adjustment. The final report determined the crash was caused by improper modification of the flight control system. The aircraft met kit specifications before alteration, but a critical component was intentionally loosened against manufacturer guidance, allowing flutter and structural failure. Aviation officials noted the aircraft performed as physics dictated. Ellison ignored available expertise, choosing personal judgment over established safety limits. It was May 28, 2013, on a calm stretch of the Adriatic Sea off the Croatian coast. The water was flat, visibility was clear, and weather conditions were stable. The yacht was operating in open water under routine cruising conditions. Tomas Varga, 44, stood barefoot on the aft deck of his privately owned motor yacht with invited investors, friends, and a small hired crew on board. After leaving shipping insurance, Varga began investing in luxury vessels, often saying his background gave him a better understanding of risk than designers or manufacturers. He frequently dismissed technical warnings as overly cautious. The yacht had recently been upgraded and was marketed as highly stable with multiple sealed compartments. Manufacturer documentation stated that the ballast system was designed only for minor trim adjustments. It was not intended for intentional flooding beyond narrow limits. Varga disregarded those warnings. He believed controlled flooding would demonstrate the yacht's stability and presented the exercise as a legitimate test. Several guests recorded while the crew followed his instructions. Shortly after leaving shore, Varga ordered the lower ballast compartments opened. Seawater entered through valves meant to regulate balance gradually. At first, the vessel responded within normal limits. The hull settled slightly lower, and onboard systems continued operating normally. Varga insisted the design could tolerate the added load and instructed the crew to continue, despite visible listing. Within minutes, water intake exceeded the system's capacity. One ballast valve was left partially open during the procedure. Instead of distributing evenly, water continued entering a single compartment as the open valve was not corrected. The yacht began listing to starboard. Loose items slid across the deck. Varga moved toward the control area as the list increased. The angle worsened rapidly. The deck sloped sharply and footing became unstable. Attempts to counterbalance were ineffective due to the open valve. Investigators later determined that as the compartment filled beyond design limits, internal pressure forced water upward through access points. As the vessel rolled again, the movement became abrupt and uneven. Varga lost traction on the wet deck surface and was thrown sideways. He struck his head against a fixed steel mooring cleat bolted near the stern. The impact fractured his skull immediately. He collapsed at deck level near the stern as water continued moving across the surface. The yacht's list continued to increase. Seawater flowed onto the deck in repeated surges. Varga remained where he fell, incapacitated by the head injury and positioned against fixed deck hardware as the water level rose. He was not recovered before the deck submerged. The vessel reached a critical flooding state and could not be stabilized. All surviving passengers were removed from the yacht. Varga's body was recovered later after the vessel settled lower in the water. An autopsy determined the cause of death to be a fatal head injury with drowning as a contributing factor. Skull fractures were consistent with impact against a fixed metal object. Water found deep in the lungs confirmed drowning occurred after the injury. The yacht later sank fully and was marked as a navigation hazard until removal. Insurance claims were denied after investigators concluded the flooding resulted from deliberate owner-directed misuse of the ballast system. The incident was later referenced within marine insurance circles as an example of owner-directed actions overriding vessel design limits. Tomas Varga trusted that knowledge of risk made him immune to it. When the system failed, there was no margin left to recover. The next case brings that same confidence home, into a setting designed for comfort, not failure. It was June 12, 2016, in Scottsdale, Arizona. The heat hadn't broken even after sunset. In the backyard of a large gated home, tables were set up for a child's birthday party. Balloons were tied to chairs. Music played softly. At the center of the yard sat a glass-enclosed swimming pool, freshly cleaned and brightly lit. The homeowner was Evan Whitmore, 41 years old. He made good money in commercial real estate and liked to show that he understood how things worked. Friends said he trusted himself more than professionals and often bragged about cutting corners to save time and money. If something broke, he believed he could fix it better on his own. A few months earlier, Evan had modified the pool's heating system himself. He installed industrial inline heating elements directly into the return line and bypassed the temperature limiters, safety sensors, and shut down alarms designed to prevent overheating. He said the safeguards were unnecessary if monitored manually. He also altered the glass pool enclosure, removing the required internal emergency release to simplify wiring. Though it looked modern and secure, the enclosure no longer met residential safety code. As the party went on, children swam earlier in the evening, then got out to eat cake. By nightfall, only adults remained near the pool. Someone mentioned the water felt cooler than earlier. Evan walked over to the control panel and turned the heat higher, saying he'd bring the temperature up quickly. Without working safety controls, the heating elements continued running at full output, superheating water as it circulated back into the pool. The water temperature continued rising beyond safe swimming limits, particularly near the return outlets where superheated water entered the pool. No alarms sounded, no breakers tripped. The system kept running without interruption. Evan decided to get in himself to test it. He opened the enclosure, stepped inside, and climbed down the ladder. Witnesses said he reacted quickly after entering. He stiffened, stood upright in the water, and appeared disoriented. The water was dangerously hot, forcing his body into immediate strain. Within minutes, the heat began overwhelming his system. His heart rate and breathing increased sharply. The sudden exposure to overheated water rapidly overwhelmed his body, impairing balance and judgment. He tried to climb back out, but his grip slipped on the rails. His movements became uncoordinated and uneven. At first, people outside the enclosure thought he was joking or exaggerating. Then, they saw him shouting and striking the glass. His steps faltered. He staggered, lost his footing, and went under. He surfaced briefly, gasping and confused, then sank again. This time, he did not resurface. Guests rushed toward the enclosure but were unable to open it from the outside. The locking mechanism remained engaged, and there was no internal emergency release. Emergency services were contacted while multiple attempts were made to force the doors and strike the glass with patio furniture, but the panels did not fail immediately. Heat and steam quickly built up inside the enclosure, further limiting visibility and making entry unsafe. When firefighters arrived, they forced the enclosure open. Equipment readings and later measurements confirmed the water temperature was dangerously high. Evan was pulled from the pool unconscious. Paramedics began treatment immediately, but resuscitation efforts failed. He was pronounced dead shortly after. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as hyperthermia complicated by drowning. His core body temperature was critically elevated, and water was found in his lungs, confirming he was alive when he went under. Doctors concluded that extreme heat exposure caused rapid loss of coordination and decision-making ability, leading to drowning. Investigators found no defect in the pool structure itself. The heating system had been intentionally altered. Temperature limiters were bypassed, safety sensors disconnected, and alarms disabled. The enclosure lacked a required internal emergency release due to homeowner modification and non-code installation. After Evan's death, inspectors reviewed his other properties and found similar safety changes. His company shut down within months. Lawsuits drained his estate, and the house was eventually sold. It was September 3rd, 2015, just after noon, on a large ranch outside a small town in central Texas. The property stretched across thousands of acres of dry land and pasture, surrounded by tall fencing and watched by security cameras. It was run as a private wildlife park, advertised to wealthy donors as an educational safari experience. Harold Jensen was 58 years old. He had made his money selling cattle feed, then grew it further by buying land during a local development boom. Over time, the ranch stopped being just a personal getaway and turned into a showpiece. Jensen brought in exotic animals and promoted the place as conservation-focused. Among them were several adult elephants kept in a wide enclosure built on land that once held cattle. The elephants were legally acquired, but the ranch did not employ certified elephant handlers or a veterinarian trained to manage animals that large. Jensen often entered animal enclosures himself. Staff members warned him repeatedly that the elephants were becoming more restless due to seasonal behavior changes. Those warnings were written down but ignored. Jensen insisted the elephants knew him and that close contact was safe. That day, Jensen was hosting a small tour for guests. Several people recorded with their phones as he demonstrated how he used a camera drone to film the animals. He explained that aerial footage helped attract donors and investors. Despite staff objections, Jensen entered the elephant enclosure to get ground-level shots while the drone flew above. About 20 minutes into the demonstration, Jensen decided to push the filming closer. He lowered the drone to get tighter shots and began walking toward the elephants at the same time, trying to guide it by hand. The animals were already alert, watching both the machine and Jensen's movement. The drone suddenly clipped a perimeter-mounted support line attached to the enclosure fencing. It spun hard, dropped straight down, and slammed into the dirt. The impact was loud and sharp. One of the propellers shattered. The motors continued running, grinding against the ground and throwing up dust while producing a high-pitched, irregular noise. The sound triggered an immediate reaction. The elephants stiffened, spread their ears, and bunched together. One of them trumpeted briefly. The noise from the drone didn't stop. It skipped and rattled as the motors fought against broken blades. Instead of backing away, Jensen moved toward the fallen drone, waving his arm as if to signal calm. The herd's behavior shifted from alert monitoring to defensive response within seconds. One adult elephant broke formation and charged. The animal struck Jensen from behind before he could react. He was lifted off his feet and thrown forward. He hit the ground face down and did not get back up. The elephant stepped down onto his upper back, pinning him to the ground and causing catastrophic chest injuries. As the herd reacted, more elephants moved through the same area, stepping where he lay. As the herd moved through the area, additional impacts compounded the injuries. Investigators later noted the animal's movement was driven by confusion and stress rather than directed aggression. Within seconds, Jensen stopped moving. He showed no signs of movement as the injuries proved fatal. Handlers outside the enclosure tried to drive the elephants away using noise and vehicles. By the time the animals were pushed back, Jensen was completely still. Emergency services were called, but no one attempted first aid inside the enclosure because it was too dangerous. An autopsy later showed Jensen died within seconds. The cause of death was massive blunt force trauma and crushing injuries to the chest. Both lungs collapsed, his heart ruptured from the pressure, multiple ribs were broken, and internal bleeding was severe. Medical examiners concluded death occurred within seconds due to massive blunt force trauma. After the incident, authorities shut down the ranch. The elephants were removed under state supervision. Guests' phones and cameras were collected as evidence, and recordings were kept by investigators. No criminal charges were filed, but regulators cited repeated safety violations and unauthorized access to animal enclosures. Jensen's ranch became a case study in debates over private ownership of exotic animals. In the months that followed, regulators increased oversight of the facility, and the elephants were removed under coordinated authority review. The ranch never reopened. It was December 25, 2017, and dawned crisp and clear in Riverside, California, with morning temperatures around 45 degrees under a cloudless sky and frost glinting on suburban lawns. The quiet residential neighborhood was blanketed in Christmas morning stillness, with excellent visibility across the landscape of Victorian-era homes. Derek James Patterson, a 32-year-old car salesman known for elaborate pranks, would make a fatally misguided decision after spending Christmas Eve drinking heavily at his sister Lisa's house. The Victorian-era home featured a narrow brick chimney from the 1890s with an opening well below modern safety standards that hadn't been used for heating in years. When Derek noticed his 8-year-old nephew's disappointment that Santa hadn't touched the cookies by the fireplace, he announced his plan to surprise the children by entering through the chimney dressed as Santa. Despite the clear morning light that revealed the chimney's inadequate dimensions and his family's protests about his size and intoxication, Derek retrieved the rented Santa suit from his car, determined to play the hero. Security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera captured Derek positioning a 16-foot aluminum ladder against the house. He climbed to the roof carrying the red suit, his movement slightly unsteady from the previous night's alcohol consumption. Derek lowered himself feet first into the chimney opening. The brick walls immediately compressed against his chest and shoulders as he descended 4 feet into the flue. His arms became pinned above his head, preventing any upward movement, with only the lower portion of his boots visible from the fireplace below. The narrow passage created a constriction that was too tight to move up or down, with his own body weight settling him deeper into the flue. Inside the house, his brother-in-law Mark heard muffled calls for help echoing from the fireplace. Mark called 911 while placing cushions beneath Derek's feet to prevent injury from the iron grate. The family could see his boots but had no way to pull him down due to the chest-level obstruction above. Responding fire units arrived shortly after the call. A supervising officer assessed the situation from both the roof and interior, determining that Derek was likely suffering from restricted breathing due to compression inside the chimney. The rescue plan required cutting through the exterior chimney wall to create an access point without causing structural collapse. Firefighters began using a concrete saw to cut through the brick exterior while monitoring Derek's condition from below. His responses grew progressively weaker as his ability to breathe effectively became increasingly compromised. The cutting process had to proceed slowly to avoid vibrations that could shower debris into his airway. Derek's vocalizations eventually stopped entirely. Firefighters continued the methodical cutting process, knowing that rushing could worsen the situation. They created a sufficient opening to insert hydraulic spreaders, gradually widening the constriction point that trapped his torso. The spreaders provided enough clearance to begin extraction. Derek's unconscious body was carefully lowered into the living room, where paramedics immediately began resuscitation efforts. His skin showed the blue-gray pallor of severe oxygen deprivation, and his pupils were fixed and dilated. Despite advanced cardiac life support measures, no pulse could be restored. Derek was pronounced dead at the scene by responding paramedics. A subsequent coroner's examination determined the cause of death to be positional asphyxia, with alcohol intoxication listed as a contributing factor. His blood alcohol content measured 0.12%. The official incident report documented the chimney's interior dimensions, the stuck damper position, and abrasion patterns on the brick walls. Evidence recovered included the doorbell camera footage showing his ladder placement, the recorded 911 call, and radio logs tracking the rescue operation. Investigators found fabric fibers from the Santa suit embedded in the brick at the constriction point, confirming the exact location where Derek became trapped. The family had the chimney permanently sealed following the incident. Derek's death became a case study used by fire departments to illustrate the dangers of confined space emergencies. It was December 25, 2015, in Charleston, South Carolina, where unseasonably warm air settled over the historic district and kept indoor temperatures high despite the holiday. Overcast skies pressed humidity into the narrow streets, and by early evening, many older homes felt stifling, even with windows cracked open. Along Meeting Street, Christmas gatherings filled dining rooms designed long before modern ventilation or fire safety standards. Penelope Worthington, 52, was a real estate agent who specialized in historic properties and was well known among friends for turning ordinary dinners into elaborate productions. That Christmas, she insisted on hosting an authentic old-world holiday, complete with heavy drapes, antique furnishings, and a flambé dessert finale. Several guests had already expressed concern earlier in the day about the heat, the fabric-heavy decor, and the decision to use open flame indoors. But Penelope dismissed the warnings as unnecessary caution. The dining room ceiling stood just over 8 feet high. A crystal chandelier with a fabric lampshade hung low over the table, positioned for visual effect rather than safety. Windows remained closed to maintain the atmosphere despite the warm weather. Throughout the afternoon and dinner service, Penelope consumed multiple glasses of wine, growing increasingly animated as she described the final presentation she had been planning for weeks. Just after 6:30 p.m., she moved into the kitchen to prepare the dessert. Instead of using standard cooking spirits, she chose a 151 proof rum, adding extra alcohol moments before serving to ensure a dramatic ignition. Her husband suggested skipping the flame entirely, pointing out the ceiling height and nearby fabrics. Penelope waved him off and carried the pudding into the dining room, positioning herself directly beneath the chandelier so every guest could see. She struck a wooden match and touched it to the surface. The alcohol vapor ignited instantly, producing a tall flare that rose higher than expected. The flame brushed the chandelier's fabric shade, which ignited within seconds. Burning fragments dropped onto Penelope's shoulders and the front of her synthetic holiday dress. The material began to melt and burn, sticking to her skin as the fire spread upward into her hair. Instead of stopping, dropping, and rolling, Penelope panicked. She turned and ran toward the kitchen, feeding the flames with movement. As she crossed the doorway, the fire intensified and smoke thickened behind her. Her husband threw water from a nearby pitcher, which knocked down some visible flames, but did nothing to reverse the severe damage already done. She collapsed in the hallway, unconscious, having inhaled superheated air and smoke. Guests called emergency services within minutes. Fire crews arrived to find smoke filling the first floor and active fire damage in the dining room. Paramedics located Penelope unresponsive, with extensive burns across her upper torso, arms, neck, and face. She was intubated on scene and transported to a regional burn center. Despite aggressive treatment, including ventilation support and fluid resuscitation, Penelope died later that night. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as complications from thermal burns and smoke inhalation, noting that the high-proof alcohol and indoor ignition created an uncontrollable flash fire. The fire marshal's investigation confirmed that the use of 151 proof rum beneath low ceilings and fabric fixtures directly caused the rapid flame spread. Residue from the accelerant was found throughout the dining area. Damage to the historic home exceeded $80,000. The incident was ruled entirely preventable. It was December 25, 2016, in Boise, Idaho, where overnight snowfall left nearly 8 inches of fresh powder and temperatures around 28 degrees. A quiet residential neighborhood sat muted under gray skies. Inside a ranch-style home, 19-year-old engineering freshman Marcus Anthony Williams prepared to test equipment he wasn't experienced enough to handle. The Williams family living room was warm and cozy, with a crackling fireplace casting dancing shadows across walls, decorated with holiday garland and family photos. Their 9-foot Fraser fir tree stood positioned near the hearth in a heavy cast-iron stand, surrounded by carefully wrapped presents waiting for the traditional Christmas morning exchange. Marcus's parents, Dana and Carl, along with his 16-year-old sister Tia, had gathered around the tree, unaware that Marcus's 6 months of indoor archery range practice and his enthusiasm for outdoor equipment that far exceeded his actual experience would soon shatter their peaceful holiday morning. Marcus's main gift was a professional compound bow with a 70-pound draw weight, complete with razor-sharp broadhead hunting arrows designed for taking down large game. The bow represented a significant upgrade from his beginner equipment. His parents suggested he take professional lessons before attempting any serious practice. The moment Marcus unwrapped the bow, his excitement became uncontainable. He immediately began handling broadhead arrows designed with wide cutting edges for hunting. Despite his parents' repeated requests to wait until he could practice outdoors safely, Marcus insisted on demonstrating his skills indoors. He claimed he could easily hit a specific ornament on the Christmas tree from across the room. Marcus positioned himself approximately 15 feet from the tree, knocking one of the broadhead arrows onto the bowstring. The living room provided barely adequate space for archery, with furniture and family members creating obstacles. His father attempted to intervene, but Marcus had already drawn the bow to full anchor point, aiming at a glass ornament. The 70-pound draw weight proved more challenging than Marcus anticipated. His inexperience caused him to lose control during the release sequence. The arrow departed at a slight downward angle, missing the target completely. Instead of embedding in the tree, the arrow struck the rim of the cast-iron tree stand at high velocity. The broadhead deflected sharply off the metal surface at an oblique angle, crossing back through Marcus's stance line as he shifted forward during the release. The razor-sharp hunting point penetrated his right thigh just below the groin area, lacerating the femoral artery. The arrow's momentum drove the broadhead several inches into his upper thigh muscle. Arterial blood immediately began spraying in rhythmic pulses across the hardwood floor. Marcus collapsed within seconds as his blood pressure dropped rapidly. His father attempted to apply direct pressure while his mother called emergency services. The family attempted to apply a tourniquet using a belt, but their lack of medical training resulted in improper placement below the knee. Emergency medical crews arrived within 8 minutes and found Marcus unconscious and pale, having lost a critical volume of blood. Responders immediately applied a commercial tourniquet high on his thigh and established intravenous access. Despite rapid intervention and aggressive treatment, Marcus went into cardiac arrest during transport. He was pronounced dead at a regional medical center after unsuccessful resuscitation attempts. The attending physician determined that a femoral artery laceration had caused fatal exsanguination despite the family's attempts to control the bleeding. A county medical examiner's investigation documented the arrow's trajectory and impact pattern. Evidence recovered included Marcus's smartphone, which had been recording the gift opening session. The footage captured the arrow's release and deflection, helping investigators confirm the sequence of events. The official report concluded that the accident resulted from improper indoor use of hunting equipment. The broadhead arrow's design, combined with the hard metal surface of the tree stand, created a ricochet effect that proved fatal. It was December 25, 2018, in Aspen, Colorado. Fresh snow from the night before covered the mountains under clear blue skies, with temperatures holding near 22 degrees. Bright sunlight reflected sharply off the powder, masking hazardous conditions on steep residential terrain where luxury cabins overlooked long downhill slopes shaped by years of erosion and freeze-thaw cycles. Brittany Nicole Henderson, 26, was visiting her aunt's mountain property for Christmas. She maintained a small social media account focused on lifestyle clips and short stunt videos, often exaggerating risk for attention. Family members later told investigators that Brittany frequently ignored safety advice when filming, believing she could manage situations others considered dangerous. By mid-morning, she had already consumed several mimosas while recording casual holiday content around the cabin. Behind the property was a long slope measuring roughly 200 feet in length, descending at an estimated 35-degree angle toward a dense stand of mature pine trees. While the fresh snow gave the surface a smooth appearance, an icy layer remained beneath from earlier freeze-thaw conditions. The family had clearly designated a safer sledding area higher up the property, away from obstacles and trees, and had warned everyone to stay off the steeper section entirely. Despite these warnings, Brittany became focused on using the steep slope. Relatives told her the terrain was unsafe and pointed out the tree line at the bottom, explaining that once a sled gained speed, there would be no way to stop. Brittany dismissed the concerns, insisting she would stay in control and that the run would only last a few seconds. She chose a lightweight plastic saucer sled stored on the property, a design that offered no steering, braking, or stability. By mid-afternoon, Brittany climbed to the top of the steepest section carrying the saucer. She mounted her phone in a chest harness to record the descent and positioned herself facing downhill. From her vantage point, the slope appeared manageable, but uneven ice patches and buried rocks were concealed beneath the powder. Wearing no protective gear and without a plan to slow herself, she pushed off. The sled accelerated almost immediately. The icy surface reduced friction, causing the saucer to pick up speed faster than Brittany anticipated. Within seconds, the sled began spinning, preventing her from orienting her body or attempt any form of control. Roughly halfway down the slope, the saucer struck a partially buried rock, jolting violently. The impact destabilized Brittany, separating her from the sled and sending her sliding uncontrollably toward the tree line. She struck a pine tree head first at high speed. The impact caused catastrophic trauma to her upper cervical spine, resulting in immediate loss of neurological function. Her body came to rest at the base of the tree, motionless. A family member reached Brittany within minutes and called emergency services while avoiding any attempt to move her. Due to the steep terrain, deep snow, and distance from the nearest access road, responders required additional time to reach the site on foot. When medical personnel arrived, Brittany showed no signs of life. The severity of her injuries was incompatible with survival, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was a traumatic cervical spine fracture sustained during the collision with the tree. Investigators documented the sledding path, impact location, surface conditions, and equipment used. Brittany's phone was recovered near the scene and confirmed the sequence of events leading up to the collision. The official report concluded that the death resulted from deliberate use of inappropriate sledding equipment on a steep, icy slope Despite explicit warnings and safer alternatives being available, the incident was ruled entirely preventable. It was December 25, 2017, and a mild winter day had settled over Mobile, Alabama, with temperatures reaching 68 degrees under partly cloudy skies and humid air that made the afternoon feel unseasonably warm. The quiet suburban neighborhood was filled with the sounds of children playing with new Christmas toys and families gathering on front porches to enjoy the pleasant weather. Billy Ray Johnson, a 38-year-old construction foreman known for relying on improvised do-it-yourself solutions, had been celebrating Christmas morning with a combination of holiday cheer and steadily increasing beer consumption since 10 a.m. Their modest ranch home featured a living room with standard 10-foot ceilings that had seemed perfectly adequate when they selected their Christmas tree. However, the 12-foot Fraser fir they had chosen was now creating a significant problem. The tree's top section was bent against the ceiling, crushing several ornaments and creating an unsightly bow that Billy Ray found completely unacceptable. By mid-afternoon, Billy Ray had consumed approximately 6 beers, enough to enhance his natural confidence while diminishing his judgment. When a family member suggested trimming the tree from the bottom or waiting to hire a professional, Billy Ray dismissed the concern with characteristic stubbornness. The solution, in Billy Ray's alcohol-influenced reasoning, was simple. He would use his trusty chainsaw to trim exactly 2 feet from the top of the tree while it remained standing in the living room, decorated and in position. Billy Ray retrieved his well-worn chainsaw from the garage, a 15-year-old model that had seen extensive use. The saw's chain brake mechanism had been malfunctioning for several months, occasionally failing to engage properly during kickback situations. Despite repeated suggestions from family members to have it repaired, Billy Ray had continued using the saw. Billy Ray positioned a wooden dining chair next to the tree, directly beneath the bent section that needed removal. The hardwood floors offered no traction for the chair legs, creating hazardous conditions that Billy Ray either ignored or failed to recognize. He started the chainsaw indoors, immediately filling the living room with exhaust smoke and the deafening roar of the engine. He climbed onto the dining chair while holding the running saw, positioning himself precariously beneath the tree's upper branches. As he raised the chainsaw above his head to begin cutting, the saw's bar made contact with the tree trunk at an awkward angle. The binding wood caused an immediate kickback reaction, with the chainsaw's bar snapping back toward Billy Ray's position. Simultaneously, the chair shifted on the smooth hardwood floor, causing him to lose his balance and fall backward. The malfunctioning chain brake failed to engage during the kickback event, leaving the chain running at full speed as Billy Ray fell. The saw's bar arced across his neck and upper chest area, causing catastrophic vascular injury to the neck. The chain continued running briefly after the initial contact, worsening the injury. A family member immediately rushed to Billy Ray's aid, finding him conscious but bleeding profusely from the neck wound. Direct pressure was applied, using kitchen towels while emergency services were called. The arterial bleeding quickly soaked through multiple layers of material. Emergency medical crews arrived within 7 minutes and found Billy Ray in severe hemorrhagic shock. Responders attempted hemorrhage control using direct pressure and hemostatic materials while establishing intravenous access. Despite rapid intervention, his blood pressure continued to fall as blood loss progressed. Billy Ray went into cardiac arrest during transport and was pronounced dead at a regional medical center after resuscitation efforts failed. A county medical examiner documented the scene and inspected the chainsaw involved. Investigators noted signs of a malfunctioning chain brake during the kickback event. Photographs recovered from Billy Ray's phone, taken minutes before the accident, showed the tree's placement. The death was ruled preventable. It was July 15, 2016. The pre-dawn darkness over Zion National Park began to fade as Lysander Pierce, a 28-year-old freelance photographer from Los Angeles, made his way up the Angel's Landing Trail. Lysander had built his social media following on extreme adventure photography, often ignoring safety barriers for the perfect shot. His 5,000 Instagram followers expected death-defying content. Ranger Mia Ortega, 42, had warned early hikers about recent rockfall and emphasized staying behind the safety chains. The methodical Park Service veteran had seen too many close calls on the exposed sandstone ridge. Lysander dismissed such warnings, carrying only his mirrorless camera and lightweight tripod toward the narrow spine that dropped over 1,000 feet on both sides. The final approach to the Angel's Landing summit required navigating a knife-edge ridge just 2 to 3 feet wide. Fixed chains guided hikers along the designated path, but Lysander had other plans. As golden light broke over the canyon walls, he spotted his opportunity beyond the safety barriers where loose sandstone created a precarious ledge. Rangers later confirmed that he had stepped onto a sloped section of eroded sandstone that climbers commonly describe as marbles on glass, where traction disappears even on dry days. Lysander set his tripod 8 feet past the chains on the unprotected slope. The rock surface, covered with sandy grit, offered little traction beneath his worn trail runners. He activated his camera's timer function and stepped into frame, backing up to capture more of the dramatic canyon backdrop. On his third step backward, Lysander's right foot encountered the treacherous combination of sand over smooth sandstone. The granular surface shifted like ball bearings under his 165-pound frame. His center of gravity moved beyond recovery, as the loose material provided no purchase. His hands reached desperately for the safety chain, but it remained just beyond his grasp. Lysander tumbled backward off the cliff face, beginning a terrifying fall through open air. His body struck multiple rock outcroppings during the descent, each impact causing massive trauma. The fall continued for approximately 8 seconds before he crashed into the boulder field nearly 1,000 feet below. The force of impact caused catastrophic head injuries, crushed his chest cavity, and produced multiple compound fractures. His camera continued its programmed sequence, capturing empty frames where he had stood moments before. The automated timer recorded the aftermath of his fatal mistake. Other hikers discovered Lysander's abandoned equipment at 7:15 a.m. Rangers initiated search protocols while assessing wind conditions. A helicopter crew located Lysander's body in the canyon below at 11:30 a.m. The recovery operation required 6 hours of technical rope work. Medical examination confirmed he had died instantly from massive blunt force trauma. Lysander's final social media post, uploaded automatically, showed him posing dangerously close to cliff edges. The post went live hours after his death, prompting concerned followers to contact park authorities. Lysander's death resulted from a calculated risk that went catastrophically wrong. His pursuit of the perfect shot led him beyond established safety measures onto unstable terrain. The combination of loose surface material, worn footwear, and proximity to a fatal drop created conditions where a single misstep became irreversible. The incident prompted Zion National Park to install additional warning signage. However, the fundamental safety measures Lysander ignored, the chains and designated path, remained the primary protection for thousands of visitors. His story became a cautionary tale about the deadly consequences of prioritizing social media content over personal safety. The camera that captured his final moments served as evidence of how quickly confidence can turn to catastrophe. It was August 22, 2017. Storm clouds gathered over Mount Washington in New Hampshire as Verity Graham, a 34-year-old meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Boston, prepared for what she considered the ultimate weather experience. Graham possessed an obsessive fascination with extreme atmospheric phenomena that bordered on dangerous. Her colleagues knew her as brilliant but reckless, someone who believed her professional expertise made her invulnerable to the forces she studied. The Mount Washington Observatory had issued severe weather warnings throughout the morning. Forecasters predicted lightning strikes every 30 seconds, winds exceeding 70 miles per hour, and golf ball-sized hail. Steve Larkin, a 51-year-old mountain guide, had spent the morning advising hikers to postpone their climbs. Graham arrived despite these warnings, dismissing them as precautions for amateurs. Graham's arrogant personality had previously earned her workplace reprimands for taking unnecessary risks during storm-chasing assignments. On this day, she deliberately chose to hike into the approaching tempest, excited by the prospect of experiencing a severe thunderstorm from the exposed summit. At 2:30 p.m., Graham began her ascent via the Tuckerman Ravine Trail. The atmospheric conditions deteriorated rapidly as she climbed higher. By 4,200 feet elevation, lightning was striking within a 2-mile radius every half minute. Instead of retreating, Graham continued upward, energized by the intensifying electrical activity. Her equipment choices proved fatally flawed. Graham carried aluminum hiking poles and wore a metal-framed backpack, creating multiple conductive pathways on her body. As a meteorologist, she understood lightning behavior in theory, but her practical judgment had been compromised by her obsession with experiencing extreme weather firsthand. At 4:45 p.m., as Graham crossed the exposed rocky summit cone, the storm reached peak intensity. Wind speeds exceeded 89 miles per hour, while lightning strikes occurred with terrifying frequency. Her weather monitoring equipment would later show 47 lightning strikes within 1,000 feet during the final 30 minutes of her life. The fatal strike occurred without warning. According to the subsequent investigation, a massive electrical discharge found Graham as she stood on the exposed granite summit. The lightning appeared to have entered through her aluminum hiking pole, which she was using for balance against the fierce winds. Witnesses later reported seeing the flash, and the electrical current would have traveled through her body in milliseconds, likely affecting her nervous system and vital organs. The strike caused immediate cardiac arrest as the electrical current disrupted her heart's natural rhythm. The massive energy discharge created explosive trauma throughout her body. Distinctive Lichtenberg figure patterns appeared across her torso and arms, marking the lightning's path through her tissue. Her metal equipment showed electrical damage. Graham collapsed instantly on the rocky summit as the storm continued to rage around her lifeless body. The Mount Washington Observatory staff spotted her motionless form through binoculars at 5:20 p.m. However, the ongoing lightning danger made immediate rescue impossible. The storm moved past the summit area at 8:30 p.m., allowing rescue teams to reach Graham's location. They found her body surrounded by scattered weather monitoring equipment, some damaged by the electrical surge. Medical examination confirmed that Graham had died instantly from lightning-induced cardiac arrest. The electrical current had caused severe internal damage to her organs and nervous system. The irony of Graham's death was not lost on her colleagues at the National Weather Service. A professional meteorologist who understood atmospheric science had deliberately placed herself in the most dangerous possible position during a severe electrical storm. Her weather monitoring equipment had recorded the very conditions that killed her. Graham's death became a case study in the National Weather Service training program, emphasizing that meteorological knowledge cannot override basic lightning safety protocols. Her story serves as a reminder that nature's forces remain deadly, regardless of human understanding or professional credentials. It was June 8, 2018. The sun blazed mercilessly over Death Valley National Park as temperatures soared toward a record-breaking 126 degrees Fahrenheit. Kiernan Dale, a 31-year-old personal trainer from Phoenix, Arizona, stood at the Badwater Basin trailhead with nothing but a single 16-ounce water bottle and unwavering confidence in his physical conditioning. Dale had built his fitness influencer brand around extreme challenges, promoting mental toughness training through deliberate hardship. Park supervisor Denise Park, a 39-year-old maintenance veteran, had posted heat warnings throughout the visitor center that morning. The forecast called for potentially lethal temperatures with ground readings expected to exceed 140 degrees. Multiple signs warned against hiking during midday hours without adequate water supplies. Dale dismissed these precautions as weakness, believing his desert training had prepared him for anything. Dale's stubborn personality had previously led him to complete dangerous desert hikes with minimal water as conditioning. He viewed hydration as a crutch that prevented adaptation to extreme conditions. This Death Valley challenge represented the ultimate test of his philosophy that mind could triumph over matter. At 6 a.m., Dale began his off-trail endurance push from Badwater Basin toward the Panamint foothills, wearing a black tank top. The early morning temperature of 98 degrees felt manageable initially. However, Dale made the fatal mistake of consuming his entire 16-ounce water supply within the first 3 miles. As the sun climbed higher, the desert transformed into a furnace. By 9 a.m., with temperatures reaching 115 degrees, Dale began showing early signs of heat exhaustion. His body's cooling system worked overtime, producing excessive sweat that depleted his already limited fluid reserves. Around 11 a.m., with air temperatures hitting 122 degrees and radiant ground heat exceeding 140 degrees, Dale encountered other visitors who offered him water. His pride led him to refuse their potentially life-saving assistance. He waved them off and continued toward West Side Road, unaware that his decision-making capacity was already compromised. As Dale's core temperature began rising above 104 degrees, his sweating mechanism started to fail. His skin became hot and dry, a dangerous sign that his body's cooling system had shut down. Dizziness and coordination problems made each step increasingly difficult as he stumbled across the salt flats. By midday, with temperatures reaching their peak of 126 degrees, Dale's condition deteriorated rapidly. He left the firm salt crust for softer terrain, increasing his physical exertion when his body could least afford it. His core temperature spiked above 107 degrees, triggering organ failures as cellular damage became irreversible. Approximately 0.4 miles east of West Side Road, Dale collapsed on the exposed desert floor. His body had reached the point where hyperthermia overwhelmed every biological system. Multi-organ failure ensued as his brain, heart, and kidneys succumbed to the extreme internal temperature. He went into cardiac arrest alone on the scorching salt flats. Denise Park's maintenance crew discovered Dale's prone figure during their afternoon patrol at 4:30 p.m. They immediately initiated emergency protocols, attempting to cool his body with available water and ice while calling for medical assistance. However, their efforts came too late. Emergency medical services arrived quickly, but resuscitation attempts proved futile. The medical examiner determined that Dale had died from hyperthermia secondary to severe dehydration, with his body weight reduced by 12 pounds from fluid loss. The tragic irony lay in Dale's expertise as a fitness professional, who should have understood basic heat regulation physiology. His social media accounts revealed his final post from that morning, boasting that Death Valley could not break him just hours before it killed him. Dale's death prompted Death Valley National Park to expand warning signage about summer heat dangers. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the deadly consequences of confusing mental toughness with reckless disregard for survival needs. It was September 14, 2015. Monsoon clouds gathered ominously over the Arizona desert as Bronwyn Asher, a 26-year-old travel blogger from Seattle, drove toward Page with her camera equipment and a dangerous plan. Asher had built her online following by encouraging readers to explore beyond designated tourist areas, often promoting rule-breaking adventures. Her impulsive personality and dismissive attitude toward local warnings had become her trademark. Leon Begay, a 47-year-old Navajo guide with decades of experience, had spent the morning turning away independent visitors at the official Antelope Canyon entrance. The patient and safety-focused guide understood the deadly nature of flash floods. Weather reports predicted heavy rainfall upstream, and tribal authorities had suspended all guided tours. Asher arrived in Page on September 13th during monsoon season, specifically targeting the dangerous weather conditions for her photography project. She had researched Antelope Canyon extensively to find unauthorized access points that would allow her to capture images without following safety protocols. Her blog promoted this approach as authentic travel. The morning of September 14th brought ominous weather conditions that any experienced desert traveler would recognize as extremely dangerous. NOAA and Navajo Nation authorities had issued explicit flash flood warnings for the area, with thunderstorms predicted 15 to 20 miles upstream. Despite these warnings, Asher remained determined to access the canyon. At 2:15 p.m., Asher located an unguarded gap in the fencing that protected Lower Antelope Canyon from unauthorized entry. She ignored multiple posted warnings about flash flood dangers and trespassing restrictions, viewing them as obstacles to her artistic vision. The narrow slot canyon stretched before her with passages that narrowed to just 2 to 4 feet in width. Asher descended the metal stairways into the twisting sandstone corridors, marveling at the sculptural beauty of the rock formations. The canyon floor remained dry locally, which reinforced her belief that the weather warnings were overly cautious. She positioned herself in the deepest sections where the famous light beams would create dramatic photographic opportunities. At 2:45 p.m., while adjusting her camera settings, Asher heard a distant rumbling sound echoing through the canyon walls. Her urban background and lack of desert experience led her to dismiss the noise as aircraft, not recognizing it as the warning of approaching floodwater. The sound grew steadily louder, but she remained focused on her photography. The flash flood struck Lower Antelope Canyon at 2:52 p.m. with devastating force. A 6-foot-high surge of muddy water, rocks, and debris entered the narrow passages at approximately 25 miles per hour, giving Asher less than 30 seconds of warning. The initial wave knocked Asher off her feet instantly, slamming her against the narrow sandstone walls with crushing force. The churning floodwater carried her helplessly through the twisting canyon passages, battering her body against rock formations. She suffered multiple blunt force injuries as the torrent swept her 400 yards downstream. Asher drowned in the violent mixture of water, sand, rocks, and vegetation as the flood level rose 12 feet above the normal canyon floor. Her body became wedged against a large boulder in a narrow section of the canyon. Navajo Nation emergency responders discovered Asher's rental car parked at an unauthorized location at 6 p.m., immediately recognizing the signs of illegal canyon entry. Search protocols were initiated, but the ongoing flood conditions made immediate rescue operations impossible. Search and rescue teams found Asher's body at 10:30 a.m. the following day, lodged against rocks 400 yards downstream from where she had entered the canyon. Her camera, discovered 200 yards away, contained time-stamped photographs taken just 7 minutes before the flood struck. Medical examination revealed that Asher had died from drowning, with additional traumatic injuries, including a fractured skull, broken ribs, and severe abrasions consistent with being tumbled through the rocky canyon by violent floodwaters. Asher's death became a cautionary tale used by Navajo guides to emphasize flash flood dangers to tourists. Her story highlighted the deadly consequences of ignoring local expertise and weather warnings in desert environments. It was November 3, 2017. Snow swirled around Mount Rainier's imposing summit as Crispin Shaw, a 29-year-old software engineer from Portland, Oregon, prepared for what he believed would be a triumphant solo ascent of the Disappointment Cleaver route. Shaw had recently taken up mountaineering following a bitter divorce, throwing himself into outdoor pursuits with obsessive intensity. Despite having only 6 months of hiking experience, he had developed an overconfident attitude that his intelligence could compensate for his lack of mountaineering knowledge. Climbing ranger Aaron Cho, a 33-year-old veteran of Mount Rainier's rescue operations, had logged Shaw's self-registration that morning with growing concern. The meticulous ranger had immediately noticed his inadequate gear list and attempted to warn him about the forecast conditions. Weather reports predicted temperatures dropping to -15 degrees Fahrenheit with sustained winds of 60 miles per hour. Shaw possessed a dismissive personality toward what he called gear obsession, often mocking experienced climbers for carrying excessive equipment. He prided himself on minimalist approaches, believing that mental toughness could overcome any physical challenge. His gear choices reflected this dangerous philosophy, consisting primarily of cotton clothing layers, a lightweight sleeping bag rated only to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and trail shoes unsuitable for winter conditions. The forecast called for a severe winter storm system, bringing Arctic temperatures and life-threatening wind chills. Experienced mountaineers had postponed their climbs. Shaw dismissed these concerns as weakness, convinced that his determination would see him through. At 4 a.m., Shaw departed from the Paradise parking area in relatively mild temperatures of 25 degrees Fahrenheit. The early morning conditions felt manageable, reinforcing his confidence. His cotton base layers initially provided adequate warmth, masking the fatal flaw in his clothing system. As Shaw climbed above 10,000 feet in elevation by late morning, the temperature had dropped to 5 degrees Fahrenheit with increasing wind speeds. His cotton clothing layers began accumulating moisture from perspiration, creating perfect conditions for rapid heat loss. By early afternoon, Shaw had reached approximately 12,400 feet in elevation, where the full fury of the winter storm engulfed him. Ambient temperatures plummeted to -8 degrees Fahrenheit, while wind gusts reached 45 miles per hour. His cotton layers had frozen solid against his skin, accelerating heat loss. Shaw's core body temperature began dropping below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, triggering severe hypothermia. The physiological effects included confusion, loss of coordination, and impaired judgment. Instead of turning back, he continued climbing as his decision-making capacity deteriorated. As hypothermia progressed, Shaw became disoriented and wandered off the established climbing route onto a lee slope where post-holing through deep snow increased his exertion. His body's shivering response began to diminish as his core temperature dropped further. Shaw attempted to create a makeshift shelter using his inadequate sleeping bag and backpack as a windbreak, but his compromised motor skills made effective shelter construction impossible. At an estimated core body temperature of 82 degrees Fahrenheit, Shaw's cardiovascular system could no longer maintain adequate circulation. He collapsed in the snow depression, his body curling into a fetal position. Cardiac arrest followed. Shaw failed to return by his checkout deadline. Ranger Cho initiated search and rescue protocols. The severe weather conditions prevented immediate aerial reconnaissance, forcing rescue teams to wait for a break in the storm. An air search crew spotted a dark object off the established climbing route during a brief weather window on November 6th. Ground teams navigated through challenging winter conditions to reach Shaw's location, confirming the discovery of his body. Medical examination revealed that Shaw had died from severe hypothermia, with his core body temperature having dropped to an estimated 75 degrees Fahrenheit before cardiac arrest occurred. The recovery team documented his frozen cotton clothing, which had to be cut away from his body. Shaw's death became a training case study for Mount Rainier climbing courses, emphasizing the deadly nature of cotton clothing in cold, wet environments. But Shaw's frozen body on Mount Rainier represented more than just another climbing fatality. It marked the end of a summer that had seen an unprecedented number of preventable deaths in America's wilderness areas. It was May 21st, 2017, before sunrise in Cappadocia, Turkey, as multiple commercial hot air balloons lifted off using brief burner bursts for a routine sightseeing flight in cold morning air. Among the passengers was Sarah Petrov, 26 years old, visiting from Plovdiv, Bulgaria, accompanied by her fiancé, James Mitchell, 29. Sarah worked as an office administrator and had saved for more than a year for the trip. It was her first time traveling far outside Eastern Europe. The flight was planned to celebrate their engagement. Friends later said she was careful in daily life and planned trips closely. She liked documenting travel with photos and short videos. The balloon ride was intended to be a routine highlight of the trip. The night before the flight, the couple decided to film a celebratory clip for their engagement. They packed a cheap handheld sparkler purchased online, assuming it was harmless because it burned briefly. They never tested it or considered where it would be used. At the launch site, crews completed final preparations and delivered a standard safety briefing to passengers, including warnings against smoking or bringing open flames near the basket or burner. After liftoff, the balloon climbed steadily as the pilot used short, controlled burner bursts to maintain altitude. Approximately 20 minutes into the flight, Sarah moved closer to the edge of the basket. She removed a small handheld sparkler from her pocket, while another passenger positioned a phone to record her and her fiancé, James. Sarah kept her arm lowered near the basket rim as she prepared to light it, remaining within the confined space beneath the burner assembly. When the sparkler ignited, it emitted a steady stream of sparks. As Sarah kept it low inside the basket, sparks came into direct contact with the skirt area above the basket as the pilot activated the burner to adjust altitude. A brief ignition occurred as sparks from the lit sparkler contacted the skirt area of the envelope. A flash followed, and heat spread rapidly across the lower portion of the fabric. The pilot shut off the burner immediately, but the damage had already compromised the balloon's ability to retain hot air. Lift began to drop unevenly. As heated air escaped, the balloon descended faster than intended and started to tilt. The pilot attempted to stabilize the descent, but control was limited as the envelope continued losing temperature and lift. The basket struck an open field at speed, bounced once, and tipped sharply. The impact threw passengers against the metal frame as the basket continued moving. During the collapse, Sarah lost her footing near the edge. James reached toward her, but the momentum of the basket prevented him from maintaining his grip. Sarah was ejected from the basket and struck the ground beside it as the structure came to rest. Emergency responders reached the landing site shortly after the crash. Sarah Petrov was pronounced dead at the scene. Her fiancé, James Mitchell, survived with minor injuries and was treated by medical personnel. Other passengers inside the basket sustained non-life-threatening injuries and were released after evaluation. Investigators later confirmed there was no mechanical failure. The The balloon, burner, and fuel systems were operating as designed. The official finding concluded that a handheld sparkler introduced by a passenger came into direct contact with the skirt area of the envelope, igniting the fabric and causing rapid loss of lift, followed by an uncontrolled landing. Flights across the region were temporarily suspended for safety reviews. When operations resumed, operators implemented additional bag checks, banned celebratory items, and revised safety briefings to emphasize that even small ignition sources pose serious risks inside a hot air balloon. It was December 18, 2018, inside a private apartment in Kyoto, Japan, where former colleagues gathered for a small reunion that extended late into the night. One of the friends present was Kenji Morita, 58 years old. He lived alone and had been struggling financially since retiring from his teaching post, relying on limited savings and occasional tutoring work. He had hesitated to attend the reunion, uncertain about how he would compare to others, but decided to go anyway. Friends described him as stubborn and quietly competitive, often turning small situations into tests of endurance or self-control rather than admitting difficulty or backing down. As the evening continued, drinks were served steadily. Friends talked about work, promotions, health, and how far everyone had come since they last met. Kenji grew quieter as the conversation shifted, listening as others compared careers and milestones. Some excused themselves to use the bathroom, and after a while, people casually mentioned how many times they had gone, folding it into the ongoing conversation. Kenji mentioned that he had not used the bathroom at all. The comment drew brief attention, and the idea settled into an informal challenge without further discussion. Kenji decided to stay seated and did not get up again. As the night continued, friends stood, moved around the apartment, and excused themselves as needed. Kenji remained in his chair. When someone asked if he was all right, he nodded and said he was fine. A friend suggested he take a break or stretch, but Kenji declined and stayed seated. Over time, his posture began to change. He shifted in his chair, crossed and uncrossed his legs, and leaned forward before sitting upright again. At one point, he stood part way as if preparing to walk toward the bathroom, then stopped. After a brief pause, he sat back down, appearing to decide against it. Kenji continued to involve himself in conversation, turning toward different friends and asking questions, keeping himself engaged. Drinks were still being poured, and without drawing attention to it, he continued drinking along with the others despite no longer appearing comfortable. By that point, Kenji had gone more than 6 hours without urinating since the evening began. His breathing grew shallow, and his face appeared pale under the apartment lights. A friend told him it was not a real challenge and that it was fine to stand up, but Kenji shook his head and remained seated. Near the end of the gathering, as dishes were cleared and tea was served, Kenji stood up abruptly. The movement was stiff and unsteady. He took one step away from the table and stopped. His body tensed, and he collapsed forward onto the floor. Friends rushed to him and called emergency services immediately. Kenji was briefly responsive before becoming unresponsive. Paramedics arrived and initiated resuscitation efforts, but his condition continued to deteriorate during transport. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that Kenji died from cardiac arrest triggered by prolonged voluntary urinary retention. Medical findings showed extreme bladder distension, worsened by alcohol intake, and an undiagnosed prostate condition. Physicians concluded that while the collapse appeared sudden, the physiological damage had been building steadily throughout the night. In the days that followed, friends expressed shock at how quickly the situation escalated. Several said they had assumed Kenji would stop once it became uncomfortable. Doctors later noted that prolonged urinary retention is a medical emergency that can lead to life-threatening complications, particularly in middle-aged men with underlying conditions. It was February 11, 2016, in an industrial suburb on the western edge of São Paulo, Brazil. The neighborhood was built around warehouses, loading docks, and small rental units stacked close together. Most people there worked night shifts. By the time the sun came up, the streets were quiet again, littered with delivery pallets and the smell of fuel and solvents hanging in the air. Renato Silva was 34 years old and worked as a forklift operator at a logistics warehouse that handled construction supplies and industrial chemicals. He lived alone nearby and kept to himself, rarely socializing after shifts. Co-workers said he avoided doctors and preferred fixing problems on his own. Some had seen him inhale solvent fumes after work. Believing it helped him relax, he also relied on workarounds, using industrial materials for personal needs instead of safer options. Later that morning, Renato met with a woman he had been seeing casually. They returned to his apartment after breakfast. According to her later account, the situation was unplanned and informal. When the moment came, Renato realized he did not have protection. She suggested waiting or stopping, but Renato told her he had a solution. He went into the bathroom and returned with a small container of industrial adhesive he had taken from work. The adhesive was designed for bonding metal and plastic parts under high stress. The label warned against skin contact and listed severe chemical burn risks. Renato appeared unconcerned. He told her it would act as a barrier and that it would dry fast. She later said she hesitated, but Renato seemed confident, almost dismissive of the danger. He had used strong chemicals before and believed he understood how they worked. Within seconds of application, the adhesive began to harden. Unlike consumer glue, it cured rapidly and reacted with moisture and heat. Renato immediately complained of intense burning. The adhesive bonded to his skin, sealing tightly and restricting blood flow. When he tried to remove it, the material had already set. Any movement caused more pain. His partner rushed him to the sink and tried washing it off with water, then soap, but the adhesive did not dissolve. Instead, the water accelerated the chemical reaction. Renato's pain escalated quickly. His skin began to blister beneath the hardened layer. He became pale and started sweating heavily. Within minutes, he was shaking. His breathing became shallow and rapid. Investigators later stated that the adhesive caused severe chemical burns and vascular damage, triggering an extreme stress response and rapid onset of shock. His partner tried calling a friend for advice, then searched online for removal methods, but nothing worked. Attempts to pry the material loose only caused more injury. Within the hour, Renato collapsed onto the floor. He was conscious but disoriented, struggling to speak clearly. His pulse was weak, and his skin felt cold despite the earlier burning. The hardened adhesive restricted circulation, while the severe burns and pain triggered a rapidly developing shock response. By the time emergency services were contacted, Renato's condition had deteriorated rapidly. He was transported to a nearby hospital, where he died later that day. The cause of death was determined to be acute shock and cardiovascular failure, resulting from severe chemical burns, vascular compromise, and extreme physiological stress. Investigators noted that the adhesive was never intended for contact with human skin, and that its chemical properties made removal extremely difficult once bonded. The woman who had been with Renato was interviewed by authorities and was not found to have contributed to the incident. Investigators concluded that the decision to use the adhesive was made by Renato alone. In the days that followed, Renato's workplace conducted an internal review. The adhesive he had used was removed from open storage and placed behind locked access, requiring supervisor approval. Safety briefings were updated to emphasize the risks of chemical misuse, even outside of work tasks. Co-workers later expressed disbelief when they learned how the adhesive had been used. Several said Renato was known for improvising, but no one imagined he would apply industrial chemicals to his own body. There was no broader public campaign, no viral footage, and no widespread media attention. It was July 29, 2018, on an interstate outside Dallas, Texas. Night traffic moved steadily beneath a series of low concrete overpasses designed for commercial vehicles. Conditions were normal. The roadway was dry, visibility was clear, and vehicles traveled at typical highway speeds. Tyler Brooks was 21 years old. He worked short-term warehouse jobs, loading and unloading freight when shifts were available. Friends described him as restless and focused on gaining attention online. He recorded frequent videos, workouts, stunts, and improvised challenges, most of which never made it past his phone. People close to him said he believed one striking clip could bring attention or opportunity without planning or preparation. That night, Tyler met two friends after work. One was a semi-truck driver for a small local operator and had access to the vehicle after hours. The other followed in a compact car. According to later statements, the idea developed casually. Tyler wanted footage that appeared extreme. Standing on top of the moving truck was mentioned and immediately accepted. No one measured bridge clearance, discussed speed, or considered how quickly the situation could become uncontrollable. After traffic thinned, the truck entered the interstate and settled into the right lane at highway speed. The car followed several vehicle lengths behind with a phone camera recording. Tyler climbed using the side steps and mirror supports and pulled himself onto the roof of the cab. Once upright, the wind affected his balance immediately. From the trailing car, he appeared fully exposed, standing without any harness or restraint. Inside the cab, the driver later told investigators he felt a slight change in weight, but did not look upward. His attention remained on traffic ahead. From behind, Tyler stood upright and began moving his arms and shoulders, shifting his stance while facing the camera. Other motorists noticed the figure on the truck. Several slowed briefly, assuming the person was secured or part of a controlled activity. As the truck continued, it passed beneath multiple overpasses. At one point, Tyler bent his knees briefly as a bridge approached, then straightened again once clear. A later review showed that the overpasses along that stretch met standard clearance requirements for vehicles, but left no safe margin for a person standing upright on a cab roof. Several minutes later, the truck approached another overpass. The structure was difficult to distinguish from the dark sky until the vehicle was nearly beneath it. Tyler was still upright, moving his arms and shifting position. There was no indication he saw the overpass or attempted to lower himself in time. At highway speed, his upper body struck the underside of the bridge. Multiple drivers reported hearing a sharp impact distinct from a vehicle collision. Tyler was knocked backward and fell from the truck onto the roadway behind it. Objects believed to be personal items scattered across the lane as traffic began braking. The truck continued forward for several seconds before the driver felt a jolt and noticed the following car swerving. He pulled onto the shoulder just past the overpass. Behind him, vehicles slowed abruptly. Drivers activated hazard lights and stopped at uneven angles as they attempted to avoid the area beneath the bridge. Tyler lay motionless on the asphalt. Due to traffic conditions and uncertainty about what had fallen, no one approached immediately. Multiple motorists contacted emergency services, reporting that a person standing on a moving truck had struck an overpass and fallen onto the road. Responders shut down lanes and reached Tyler within minutes. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of death was determined to be massive blunt force trauma resulting from the bridge impact and subsequent fall onto the roadway. Investigators examined the truck, bridge, and roadway and found no mechanical or structural failures. Clearance measurements confirmed the overpass met all regulatory standards. The truck was operating normally, and the driver was not exceeding the speed limit. Authorities concluded the incident resulted solely from Tyler's decision to stand on top of a moving vehicle. The driver was questioned and released without charges after investigators found no mechanical failure or intent to cause harm. Partial video clips ended seconds before the impact and were never released. It was October 3rd, 2015, late at night in Brno, Czech Republic. The chemistry building was nearly empty, classrooms dark and halls quiet. One third-floor study room remained lit, connected directly to a teaching lab. The air smelled of coffee and cleaning solution. 4 exhausted students sat around a cluttered table, studying in a space that had slowly filled with lab equipment, beakers, gloves, and unlabeled containers that no one questioned anymore. One of those students was Marek Novak, 22 years old, an undergraduate chemistry student who lived in the university's lab housing. He was not known for top grades, but he was well-liked during long nights. Classmates described him as someone who broke the tension with jokes and small dares when everyone else was tired. He often turned ordinary moments into distractions, meant to keep people awake. Marek chewed gum constantly. When the flavor faded, he had a habit his classmates had seen many times before. He would dip the gum into citric acid powder to make it sour again. It was a food-grade packet he kept in his bag. Friends told him it was unnecessary and dumb. Marek brushed it off every time, saying he knew what he was doing. The habit became background noise, something people noticed but stopped questioning. That night, the group reviewed notes from a recent lab practical. Marek appeared exhausted, repeatedly rubbing his eyes and struggling to stay focused. Marek reached into his bag, pulled out a piece of gum, unwrapped it, and chewed briefly. Then he stood up and walked toward the shared shelf without announcing what he was doing. No one reacted. This was normal behavior for him. He was looking for his citric acid packet. Instead, he picked up a small plastic container from the shelf. Inside was a fine white powder, dry, odorless. For From a few feet away, it looked no different from citric acid or baking powder. The front of the container had no label. On the side was an old strip of tape with writing that had faded and partially peeled off. One student asked what he was using. Marek glanced at the container and dismissed the concern. Another pointed out the risk of unlabeled jars, but Marek laughed it off and proceeded anyway. He did not measure it. He did not read the tape more closely. He dipped the edge of his gum into the powder, tapped off the excess, turned back toward the table, and put it into his mouth. And his reaction was instant. Marek froze as soon as the gum touched his tongue. He stopped chewing, gagged, and spat it onto the floor. His face tightened as he made a sharp choking sound, drawing immediate attention from the other students. He clawed at his mouth as if trying to scrape something off. Saliva poured out as he bent forward, coughing and spitting at the same time. When someone asked if he was okay, he tried to answer but couldn't form words. His breathing became loud and uneven. He stumbled to the sink and began rinsing his mouth repeatedly, shaking his head as if in disbelief. One witness said his lips turned red almost immediately. His face showed pain, not confusion. Another student picked up the container and examined the tape more closely. What little writing remained did not say citric acid. It identified a highly caustic alkaline cleaning reagent used for glassware maintenance, strong enough to cause severe chemical burns on contact. Marek's coughing escalated into strained gasps, and he dropped to one knee beside the sink. Emergency services were contacted, and campus staff arrived within minutes. By the time responders reached him, Marek was on the floor. His breathing was labored and noisy. Swelling from the deep chemical burns inside his mouth and upper airway progressed rapidly, restricting his ability to breathe. Witnesses said his eyes remained open, but his responses slowed and became incoherent. Students tried to keep him upright while explaining what had happened. Emergency crews attempted to manage his airway and stabilize him, but the injury progressed rapidly. Marek died from respiratory failure caused by severe alkali chemical burns to his mouth and upper airway. In the days that followed, the university closed the building temporarily. Shared shelves were cleared, unlabeled containers were removed, new rules banned reagents from study and housing areas, and reinforced labeling requirements. Students who had used the room later said the most disturbing part was how ordinary it all felt until the moment it wasn't. There was no experiment, no explosion, just one habit, one unlabeled container, and a decision made without thinking. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.